Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Humanist Perspective. I'm your host for this evening, Jim Dugan. My guest this evening is Dr. Nicholas Mitchell. Dr. Mitchell is a Racial Justice Fellow at the Jesuit Social Research Institute. He's a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in history from Louisiana State University. In 2016, he received his PhD in curriculum and instruction, also from LSU, where he worked with the Curriculum Theory Project on topics such as black male educational achievement, the school-to-prison pipeline, and social justice education. Over the last 9 years, he has served as a teacher in both the public and private school systems, in the community college system, and at LSU, and is a trained community organizer. He became a fellow at the JSRI in 2016 with a special focus on race and racism. Thank you for being with us this evening, Dr. Mitchell. What we're going to talk about this evening is something that's very current. We have an amendment on an upcoming ballot. This is called the Constitutional Amendment number 2, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And that will be on the November 6th ballot.
Yes.
Right? And this is a very, very important issue. Can you tell us just a little bit about what it's about?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. Constitutional Amendment number 2, what it seeks to do is to require unanimous jury verdicts for all criminal cases in the state of Louisiana.
In a nutshell.
In a nutshell, absolutely.
And this is important because Louisiana is unusual in these United States in this respect.
Yes. Louisiana and Oregon, we're the only 2 states that allow for conviction by non-unanimous juries. You need at least 10 votes to convict someone in the state of Louisiana. Mm-hmm. Louisiana is the only state, though, that you can be sentenced to life without parole by a non-unanimous jury verdict. And so that is that's a major thing. Like under the current state constitution, there's Article 17, Section 1, that in order to sentence somebody to death, you need a unanimous verdict. In order to sentence somebody for a crime where incarceration is optional, you need a unanimous jury verdict. Any trial involving 6 jurors, you need a unanimous jury verdict. But for everything else, you only need 10. And
10 out of 12.
10 out of 12. So you can think about it in the sense of when I took civics, it was it's 12 angry men. It's that play. It's you watch Law and Order. It's you need 12 jurors to convict. I've lived my entire life, I'm 36 years old in Louisiana, without the right to due process, which a unanimous jury verdict really entails. There's no reasonable doubt in that case, where in every other state, even in Mississippi, reasonable doubt, 1 juror can send someone home. That's not the case here. My father has lived his entire life in the state without the right to due process. My grandfather lived and died in Louisiana without the right to due process. That's how far back this goes. And we have this golden opportunity to fix this really egregious law that we've all lived our lives under here.
So due process is a kind of constitutional law that has to do with making sure people get their day in court, and that everybody's handled the same way, everybody gets treated equally. Can you explain a little bit more about how I can't even say it right, non-unanimous juries violates due process?
Yes. Well, I mean, like I was just saying earlier, if beyond a reasonable doubt is understood in the United States to be, popular in the other 48 states, to be a unanimous verdict. The fact that we don't go by that, we are sending people to jail, but for where they committed the crime, but for their location. Some of these guys and some of these women would go home. They would be acquitted. They'd be hung juries, and some of those, of course, would imagine go back up for trial, but others would not because of a lack of evidence, because the prosecution could not prove its case. And the fact that we've lowered the bar for so long really violates that that very basic natural law. You have a natural right to due process, and we frankly we do not have that in this regard.
So it's that in most of the states in the United States, if you committed the exact same crime, you would have to have a unanimous decision by the jurors. But in 2 states, of which Louisiana is one, you can get away with a conviction with only 10 out of the 12 jurors. And so that's interesting that so many other states are different from Louisiana and Oregon, I think you mentioned. How did we get in this situation? Why is the law here different?
Well, the split jury, at the time it was called the split juries, came into being in Louisiana in 1880. And this was following the Supreme Court case Strouder versus West Virginia, which they said you could not ban people on account of their race from a jury. One thing you have to understand about this current law is it actually goes back to the end of Reconstruction and the reimposition of Jim Crow. It first enters the state constitution, though, in 1898 when they had the state convention here to create a new constitution. It was actually held in New Orleans at Old Tulane Hall. And why are they doing this? Well, what they really wanted to do was to undo the 2 previous state constitutions, 1868 and I believe it was 1874. Why? Because those were especially egalitarian, especially 1868. 1868 state constitution has a lot of free people of color, formerly at that point, now they're just citizens, of from New Orleans. We're talking about Oscar Dunn, who had been the lieutenant governor. He had been born a slave, and then he became lieutenant governor. P.B.S. Pinchback, who later became the first, very briefly, but he was the first black governor, and then he later became a senator, a United States senator. So to the people who really wanted to reimpose Jim Crow, Louisiana is an abject nightmare, because all of a sudden slavery ends 1865. 3 years later, a lot of these people who had been slaves, not only can they read and write, they can write laws and constitutions. So that's really what this was about. And the Constitutional Convention of 1898, it strips a lot of the black voting rights, but this particular nugget is tucked in there as a way of limiting black civic power. And one of the reasons we know is from Thomas Sims, who was a former Confederate senator. He's most probably famous for giving the Confederacy its motto. And he said that the whole mission, he was in charge of the Judiciary Committee, that their entire mission was to establish the supremacy of the white race in the state to the extent to which it could legally and constitutionally be done. So
he actually said that out loud.
Yes, he said that out loud. None of these guys were bashful. This was one of the first. This was the first all-white constitutional convention in Louisiana since the Civil War. And what they did was, being that the federal government would not let you completely ban, and these are even the federal government that's allowing Jim Crow to happen, they're not going to let you completely ban people on account of their race from being on the jury. So how do you get around that? Well, we'll put one or two, or at the time it was 9. You only needed 9 people to convict. They changed that in 1973 to 10. And that's how you would really negate their political power, because it doesn't matter if you have 1 or 2 people on the jury. You can, it's a split verdict. So that whole standard of reasonable doubt doesn't hold at that point.
So the objective then of this legislation that creates the non-unanimous jury was to ensure that if all the white people on the jury agreed about someone's guilt, that they would be able to control the outcome of that.
And I mean, this, of course, this just doesn't apply to black people. I mean, you go in any parish in Louisiana at the time, and who's the group that people don't like? It could be, people who are Cajun. It could be poor whites. It could be Catholics. Going, back into the past, and they could use this law to basically wall them off and negate their, their judicial opinion, and it's just stuck. Long after all of the Jim Crow laws have died, this one is still very much lingering.
So we have this hangover from the past, and those can be hard to get rid of sometimes as a matter of law. And so you're part of a group now that is actively working to change this, and that's how this. Can you say a little bit about how you got this on the ballot?
Well, I mean, frankly, I had nothing to do with it being on the ballot. The last legislative session, I want to say it was Senator Morrell, who's from here. He introduced the bill, and it just caught fire. That's how I found out about it. There's a lot of people at the Capitol were talking about how it was time to do this, and I mean, frankly, I didn't even know until a year ago that this was the actual law. Like, I had to go look it up myself, and just sitting on my phone outside the state capitol in Baton Rouge reading the statute, and just my jaw is just laying on the pavement. I was like, I cannot believe that we've let this go on for since 1880, like, 138 years. So it's just a lot of people began to sign on, and that's why if you look at the coalition today, it is robust, it is bipartisan, it represents most points on the political spectrum.
I find that fascinating in its own right, that as so often today in political process in America, you see an extreme polarization, right? So you'll see people take 2 sides, and you can often predict who's going to take which side. But with this amendment that's on the ballot, there's an unusual collection of bipartisanship here. You have Louisiana GOP, you have Louisiana Democrats, you have Catholic bishops, you have the Louisiana Family Forum, you have a number of groups that are often usually quite opposite, and they're all taking the same side on this particular measure. How did you do that?
I think that the truth always speaks for itself. And the old quote, there's nothing stronger than an idea whose time has finally arrived. And I think with this one, the idea has finally arrived. It's time. And I think, the Republicans and the Family Forum and all the other conservative groups, they looked at this and they said, yes, this is time. The partisanship can wait for another day. We're going to do truly a public good in doing this, and it's been really interesting to work on, and having these relationships across all these different spectrums, and it makes me very hopeful, and especially in a time where just bipartisanship is so hard to find, and things are so politically balkanized that down here in Louisiana, of all places, right? We have genuine bipartisanship. And we've had this going on a lot of the criminal justice reforms going back a year or two now. And that, now this is where this effort has gone to. And I think it's very telling, and I think that it's very good. And I'm really, really proud to be a part of it.
So we do want to mention the organization, the www.unanimousjury.org, a 501c3, I assume, or is it a political 501c4? Or
I want to say it's it might just be both. They might have both
wings.
Both wings going on. Yeah.
And so this is an active group that is trying to bring these different people together and to try to get out the vote.
Yes.
So. And getting out the vote is very important. Of course, we have an election coming up, and November 6th, hint, and getting the vote out, regardless of your stance on any particular issue, if you want people to vote a certain way on an issue, the first thing you have to do is get them to go to the polls.
Yes. The Unanimous Juries Coalition is doing a lot of those efforts. And frankly, that's one of the benefits of this big bipartisan coalition is, we're doing outreach on all sectors. Even going into North Louisiana to the evangelical vote and the Catholic vote. And of course, when it comes to any election, ignorance and apathy are always the great electors. And mostly what I find is that people are unaware that this is the state law. So when I tell them that, no, this is what's actually going on, the first response I get is absolute disbelief. And then they're like, okay, how do we fix this? I'm like, well, in November, you can vote on Constitutional Amendment 2, you vote yes, and then this law goes away, and then we have unanimous jury verdicts for all criminal cases. And we're hoping that this dynamic change is enough to get people to the polls, to vote yes on this, which I believe it will be. I believe that the people of Louisiana, when presented with the opportunity to make lasting change and fix a great historical wrong, and all they have to do is vote, they will seize the chance. But we take nothing for granted. That is.
You have to be careful about that, right? I live in New Orleans, so maybe in some ways this is considered a safe place for this kind of ballot measure. But I would imagine that members and groups within unanimousjury.org are pounding the pavements in the rest of the state.
Oh yes, very much so. It's very activity all around the state, in Baton Rouge, Lafayette, up in North Louisiana, and Shreveport. I think if we had a motto for how we're campaigning and doing this advocacy, it's basically campaign like you are deathly afraid you're going to lose. Don't think because it's obvious that you're going to win. We take nothing for granted here. And, so we really take seriously asking people for what I think is one of the most valuable things you can ask civically from a citizen is for their vote. And that's what we're doing. We're asking them for their vote and to help us change this egregious law.
I just as a side note, I recently noticed an app out there called Go Vote.
Yes.
GEAUX Vote, and I'm old-fashioned, I walk to the polling place, but this is a really nice app that reminds people when the election is, and you can look up your voter information in there, where your polling place is, and see the complete ballot for your location, including this particular amendment, and you can even check off how you want to vote on the different candidates and the different issues and take it with you.
Yes.
It seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I'm
like Amendment 2, it's an idea whose time has come.
Yes, I'm a big fan of digitizing any access to information when it comes to democracy. We all have these smartphones, so it makes sense for you to look up your local ballot. Make sure you're registered. The deadline for online registration is, I believe we're taping on the 15th. It's the 16th. So I really hope, I know the Unanimous Juries Coalition has been pushing this on Facebook. Register, make sure you're still registered. Make sure you know where you're going.
Make sure you know where your polling place
Yeah.
is. Make sure you know when the election
Yes.
is.
Make sure you know the hours of the election.
By the time anybody sees this, the registration deadline, I'm sure, will have passed, but
Yes.
the election will probably still be ahead of them
Yes.
coming. So if this passes, how fast does the law change?
I believe, and I could be wrong on this, I want to say the law goes into effect on the first of the year. So in 19. It may actually happen earlier, but usually these ballot initiatives kick in the next calendar year.
So do you go to meetings with unanimousjury.org very often? I mean,
Yeah,
and do you see representatives from all of these different groups there very often?
Yes. Usually we it's maybe the we had a meeting in October, and you'll have everyone around the table. You'll also have a lot of people on the phone. One of the effort that I specifically work with are the faith community outreach, and we have our own side conversations about how to engage the faith community. We've written a sign-on letter, and of course, probably the larger news, which have made all the papers, was the Conference of Bishops coming out and affirming that changing the law is right according to Catholic social teaching, which, being how big the Catholic Church is in Louisiana, that's a major endorsement. But I mean, when we talk about communities of faith, to me I also include communities the humanists and atheists and people of that. Really anybody that has social justice in their eyes and in their heart. Like, this is a great opportunity to exercise some social justice.
Some of the groups that are listed as participating include the Advocate Editorial Board, Times-Picayune, NOLA.com, the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus, Congo Square Preservation Society, Music and Cultural Coalition, Interfaith Coalition for Justice, Democratic Party, Louisiana GOP, all over the place.
Yes.
It's just this very varied group. Independent Women's, is that the name of the group? I don't know that group. Independent Women's Organization. So it's quite a collection, as well as many individual elected officials who are in both Republicans and Democrats again.
Yes, I can't frankly keep up with as many people have come out and endorsed this. I mean, there are groups that I haven't heard of that I'm making mental notes of. Because when this is over and now we have new issues coming up, these are people that I can potentially work with, and as well as people on the opposite side of the aisle. We have a relationship, that we can continue this dialogue on other criminal justice issues and whatnot.
So you're planning a big party?
I am a superstitious man. I do not plan victories until I see the victory. I'm the guy who sits and watches, and when they call the election, only then will I allow myself to party, and usually I'll go get a hamburger or something. But I think I would say we're optimistic, but we're doing the work. We're not falling back, especially now we're only like a week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks out from the actual election. Now is not the time to stop.
And it's hard to be, you don't want to be overly optimistic, because sometimes that makes people complacent. They don't go vote if they think their candidate or their issue is a shoo-in. Right?
Yes, that's exactly right. And that's not our approach. We are work the issue until the ballots are counted. That's where we are. Till the polls close, then we see what happens, see if we're successful or not.
So how do you see this dovetailing into other kinds of work that you do? This is not your only project. You have lots of other things on your plate.
Well, as far as this is a genuine justice matter. So it falls right into Jesuit Social Research Institute's mission, and it's also clearly a racial justice issue. But not only. When we talk about criminal justice, you usually talk about how the racial disparities, there are quite a few white people that have been convicted under these. So this is one of those, like all truly bad ideas that come from Jim Crow, it's going to hurt everyone as much as it can. And it's really in the interest of fairness. The current law is fundamentally unfair. And so this was just a really easy, natural progression from my other work involving criminal justice and racial justice and social justice in general.
So we only have a few minutes left here. What would be the main take-home message right now you'd want to tell our audience?
Okay, that's right at the camera.
Sure, go ahead.
Vote yes on election day. There's November 6th. That's a Tuesday, 2018. Vote yes on 2. That's what we're asking you to do.
Thank you. And so people, of course, with any kind of election, people have many avenues, many sources to go find out things about whether they're registered, where to go vote, what the issues are. Information about the amendments and the candidates are available like any other election here, and they have a lot of different possible ways to find out things, form their opinions, make their judgments about how to vote. If they would go out and vote.
Yes. Please vote. Vote yes on 2. Constitutional Amendment number 2. Thank you.
And is there any other people out there that you think that if somebody wanted to help participate in this, how would they reach out to you? How would they?
I would tell them go to the Unanimous Juries Coalition's website and sign up for updates and see how you can get involved, and they'll very much loop you into events and phone banks and canvassing opportunities, as well as just tell your friends, tell your family that when this election is happening, explain to them what's going on and convince them to vote. Take them to vote with you if they all share the same polling place. Give somebody who needs a ride to the polling place a ride to the polling place. But I think the biggest thing people can do besides going to the website is to not be apathetic and to be informed about what this ballot initiative and the other ones will do.
That's good advice in any election.
Yes.
And so there are many different ways that people can support this, both formal and informal.
Yes.
Just helping somebody get to the polling place, being informed, as well as more formal kinds of things like you mentioned, phone banking. And if they really want to get involved, there's those avenues available as well.
Absolutely.
And are there any other last-minute things you'd like to say about this issue? No, you've said it at this point. Dr. Nicholas Mitchell, thank you so much for being with us this evening. It's been an interesting discussion about Constitutional Amendment 2 on the upcoming November ballot.
Thank you very much, Mr.